Well, hey, good afternoon there. This is Joe Van Cleave, and once again I'm presenting an episode of my typewriter video series. Today is going to be episode 3, and if you remembered from yesterday's or last week's episode, we covered the basic functions of typewriters, and I used as an example 4 portable machines and showed you the various features between them. Well, today I've brought one of those portable machines out to a city park again. This is the Brother-made Webster XL747. Today's video I would like to show the basics of loading, threading the paper up, getting it set, and setting it up to type. In other words, how to use the typewriter, how to get it set up to use. And also I'm going to be covering a couple other features of typewriters that I did not have time to cover in the last episode. So stick with us, please. To start with, I've taken the sheet of paper out of the typewriter just to show you how we're going to load it. This particular typewriter has a paper support, and there's a button on the back here that you push to release it, to raise it. You have your 2 margin settings. If you haven't set up your margins yet for your piece of paper, I generally move them all the way out to the far extremes. Then we're going to load the paper up by inserting it behind the rubber platen, okay? Getting it set up close to the 0 point on the paper scale, and then you're going to roll your platen knob and roll the paper in. You're going to lift up the paper bale, thread the paper underneath the paper bale. Then you'll notice that typically the corners, the 2 sets of corners, are not even. So what you're going to have to do is release the paper tension on the lever on the right side of the platen there. You're going to get all 4 corners lined up, and then you're going to pull it tight, get it even, and then set it to the paper scale to the 0 point, and then you'll reset the tension back. So this gets the paper nice and straight in the typewriter. Okay, next we're going to get our margins set. So as you remember, you can move the platen manually by holding onto the right knob and pushing the carriage release lever. It enables you to move the carriage the full range that the margins allow. So I typically like to have for a conventional full-size piece of paper, letter-size piece of paper, about 1 inch or so in from the left margin. So I'm going to space over to about 1 inch. And then I'm going to move my left margin release in until it stops. And it's going to stop right where I set that margin at. Similarly, on the right side, if I move it all the way over to the right and then back it up to about within 1 inch or so of the right margin, right edge of the paper, I'm going to now slide my right margin stop over until it stops. And now my margins have been set to those distances from the edge of the paper, and now I'm pretty much set for my margins. Okay, it's important to make note now that one of the reasons why I had you align the left edge of the paper to the 0 mark on the paper scale is that in the event, of course, you're going to be removing your piece of paper from the typewriter eventually, and you're either going to be reinserting it or you're going to be typing on a fresh piece of paper. Well, now with a fresh piece of paper, when you rethread a new piece of paper into the machine and you get its left edge aligned with the 0 mark on the paper scale, your margins that have already been set from previously are going to still be at the same relative distances inboard of the edge of the paper. So you don't have to reset your margins every time. Now we've already covered the left and right margins, how to set them and align them to the paper. The next thing is going to be when you're typing on your piece of paper, you're going to eventually come to near the bottom of the sheet. And unless you have a way of knowing where the bottom is, you might be surprised to either run out of paper or at near the very bottom of the sheet, sometimes the pressure rollers underneath the platen knob will not grip the paper very well and your paper slips and your line gets crooked. So you kind of want to know before you get to the end of the page, and usually within about 1 inch or so of the bottom. So in keeping with that, I want to also recommend that you use a backing sheet of paper when you're typing. There's several reasons for this. First of all, it preserves the life of the platen, the rubber roller, because it helps dampen the impact of the type slugs. The other reason is that it will quiet the movement or the sound of the action of the typewriter. It'll quieten it down a little bit. And then the third reason is it'll actually typically make the imprint of your typewriter a little bit better, especially if the platen is hard. So since you should be using a backing sheet of paper. One of the ways that you can tell when you're coming near to the bottom of your sheet of paper is if you make some marks, some bold ink marks near the bottom of the piece of paper on, let's say, the left side, and you do it so that regardless of how it's oriented, it'll be on the left side. And once you put that backing sheet of paper underneath your main sheet of paper, you're going to be able to see it, especially if your typing paper is fairly thin and translucent. So when you thread the typing paper into the stack of both sheets into the machine and get them lined up like you should, you're going to get both sets of corners lined up on and align the left edge to the 0 point of the scale. When you come down, when you're typing, you get down near the bottom. As you come up to it, you're going to see that mark underneath the left side on the very left. You're going to see it when it comes to within about an inch of your sheet of paper, and that's how you can tell when you're going to run out of paper. Now, some machines do have a feature where they have a metal cylinder near the left edge of the platen that's a scale for determining when the bottom of the paper comes up. If you have that, fine. Other machines like the Olympias, on the paper support, it telescopes up and it has marks on it that you can align to the bottom of the sheet of paper when you first thread it in. But if your typewriter is like this one, a basic typewriter, a portable, that doesn't have those features, use a backing sheet of paper and put a bold ink mark on the backing sheet of paper as a way of gauging it. The other way you can do it, if you're not using a backing sheet of paper, is you can simply take a light pencil and make a tick mark on the paper down near the bottom. But that's a little bit inconvenient, especially if you're in the middle of typing a whole bunch of stuff and you don't want to stop on every page and make a tick mark. Just use your backing sheet of paper with an ink mark, and that works really well. Let's talk about line spacing for a minute. This machine has 1, 1.5, and 2 line spacing control. Which should you use? It's really a personal preference as to what kind of document you're typing, how you want it presented. If it's a rough draft where you think you might be doing some edits of what you're writing, it's sometimes nice to have room between the lines. So in that case, you might want to set it to 1.5 or 2 line spacing. Typical typewritten manuscripts commonly had 1.5 or 2 line spacing. But if you're writing a personal letter, it's fine to compact all the lines together and closely, for instance, like I was typing here. So again, it's a personal preference as to what kind of document you're doing, how you want it to look, as to what your line spacing is. Now let's talk about the basic action of typing. The difference between typing with a typewriter and typing with a computer keyboard is, with a computer keyboard, you basically have to overcome the switch pressure of each button, and it will make an indication on your software screen that you've typed a letter. But with manual typewriters, you basically are accelerating the type slug or the type bar toward the ribbon. And if you push it real slowly, you'll see that you don't make a mark at all. But you have to develop velocity. The type bar has to be going at a speed so that it hyperextends itself, accelerates itself past the stopping point and mashes the ribbon against the paper. So typing action on a manual typewriter is about the velocity of the type bar. So for that reason, I like to recommend for beginners to start out, even if you're an exceptional touch typist on a computer, I recommend you start out with just your 2 index fingers and do 2-finger typing. It's not hunt and pecking, because if you know the keyboard, you know where all the letters are from being a computer typist, a keyboardist. So you're not hunting, but you are just pecking with 2 fingers. I would recommend then, later on, go to the 2 fingers per hand method, so you can get a little bit more speed out of it. The problem with touch typing on a manual typewriter, if you're not used to it, is the 2 lesser fingers, the ring and pinky finger on both hands, they're typically very weak. So while I might be able to touch type with the 2 more dominant fingers, on my hand, I have to kind of rotate my hand to get enough velocity on those weaker fingers, and it's something that you just have to practice and build up some muscle for that. But for me, if I want a really good imprint on a manual typewriter, I typically stick with my stronger fingers. And so the other thing is, you don't want to rest your fingers on the keys. You want to have them slightly above them so you can get a little bit of velocity on the key before you actually touch it, because you're really accelerating the key, and you don't want to hold the key down. You want it to be kind of a quick snap that snaps that type bar into the paper. So that's basic typing action. Okay, after you have your margin set, of course your paper threaded, you have your line spacing selected, you know where the bottom of the page is going to be. So as you're typing and you're using that proper typing action, when you get near the end of the line, most machines are going to have a bell. The one on this one is kind of intermittent, but you're going to be typing along and you're going to hit the bell or hit the end of the line. And on a word processor, it'll automatically do a carriage return line feed, which is what it really is called. And it'll go back to the left side, advance the line, and you can continue typing. But in a manual typewriter, of course, you have to do the carriage return line feed with the carriage return lever. And it pushes the carriage all the way back to the left margin, and it also advances the line based on the setting of your line feed selector. So again, those are the two functions of the carriage return lever, and just make sure that you do push the lever all the way back and make sure it advances the way you want it to. Now there's one feature of typewriters, of some typewriters, that they have. Not all typewriters have this, but I didn't have time to cover it in the last episode, but that is called the half spacing feature. The half spacing feature is if you press your space bar and release it, if your carriage moves 2 times, that is, if it moves part way when you're pressing it and moves another time when you release it, you have a half spacing machine. A half spacing machine gives you the ability to insert a missing letter in an already typed word in an already typed line. So for this test, what I've done is I've typed a line that says testing, 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 and the middle word is missing the letter I. So I've already typed that line. It looks like I don't have room to insert another letter. What you want to do is you're going to want to first erase that middle word, that whole word that is misspelled or is missing the letter. So instead of me having to erase it, I retyped the line with that word missing. Okay, so pretend like we've erased that middle word. You're going to want to back up the machine so your typing position is on the last letter of the previous word. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to press and release the space bar. And then you're going to press and hold the space bar while you type the T. Release the space bar, press it again, and type the E. Release, press again and hold, type the S. Release, press again and hold the T. Release, press again and hold the missing I. Release, press again and hold the N. Release, press again and hold the G. And the result is now you have inserted the extra letter in that same word, the same size area. And then what you've done is you've taken a half space out of the space between the first word and the middle word, and you've taken a half space out of the space between the middle word and the last word, and you've used that extra space to fit your extra letter in there. So that's the half spacing feature and how that works. So it's very handy when you've already been typing, you missed the error and you kept on typing. Now you can go back and insert another letter, and this happens with half spacing machines. Well, I hope that you got some value out of today's video. Again, this was the basics of threading up paper in a machine, setting your margins, setting your line spacing, the basics of typing action, how to use a half space machine for inserting missing letters in an already typed line. So we're going to be doing many other videos in this series. Please leave your comments, suggestions, criticisms in the comments field below the video. But I really enjoy doing these videos. I enjoy taking a small portable typewriter out somewhere, and I hope to continue in this series to be able to take these videos to places that you might not be able to visit yourself. So in the meantime, find something really good to write about. Get that typewriter out, get it working, and until next time, this is Joe Van Cleave from Outdoors in great Albuquerque, New Mexico. You have yourself a great day.